Hemshek Samech Vav, page Kuf Ayin Vav. Today is Chaf Vav Tamuz. Tafshin Samech Ches.
Alright, so we saw that the Mila of Shefa was that the Mahus HaOra Atzma is Nimshach to the Makabel. And Afila in the Aved of V'Afta Es Havaya Lakecha Ki Hu Chayecha. And we saw that the Moshe or the Isboninus that the Adam has is that the Adam way of Chai Nafshe. What he wants that there should always be these pastures and the Gila, the highest in his goof from Nishmotzai, Kishmish Ken, Kishmish Beinen, the Elakus is Machaya Kol Elements in Ivroim, and that the whole Ike of the elements is Elakus, then he's Misera Be'ava to the Eberstadt. And we saw the diktuk of the Lashon that he's writes about Gila Elakus Bo'elam Uba Nafshay, and we saw that through that Ava is as Nimshach the Mahus HaOra Elokis Mamich. In other words, Vivalas a Shefa is Inyana a Gila Mahus is Inyan. And in this case, it's even albeit it's a Ha'ora Elokus, but the Etzem Ha'ora is Nimshach, and therefore the Adam is Mekabel, Agila Elokus, but even Mahus Ha'ora B'toich Nafshe. We saw that was a Chide Schnifler Benegeh to that Ava V'Afta Savayar Kercha Ki Hu Chayecha. Uki Yadua Mavua B'Moki Macher, Aefresh Bein is Pashtas Achayas Beguf Lam Shochis Achayas Alidei Sayers. I think that's where we were holding better. And we saw that the Amshocha from the Koichos and from the Nefesh, how it's mislavish in the Koichos, and the Koichos are mislavish in the Eivre Haguf. And we saw that was Amshocha from the Mahus HaOra. That the nefesh, even though the koyches of Beklau not the etzema nefesh, they're only a ha'ora. Of a sokolsof, the mohus of that ha'ora is nimshach alidei koyches into the evrei hagu. Kamoikein hu ba'ava the kiyu chayer. I'm sorry. Aefresh bein nishpashtus ha'chayes beguf lam shoches ha'chayes yadei sayres. The amshoches ha'chayes be'evrei haguf. In other words, that the once again, like we saw in the Inyonim Adka, and I feel how it is in Gila Elakus Milmaila, they were only talking about Ha'oras. We're not talking about Etzem. We're soon going to learn and stress again that Kol Etzem Eino Mispashes. It's not shaykh that Etzem should be Mispashes or Miskale in the Klei HaMakabel. We're only talking about different madrigas in Ha'ora. However, the Mila of Shefa is that the Etzem Ha'ora itself, the Mohusa, the Ha'ora, is Nimshach, like we saw in Ashpur Saseichel from the Rav to the Talmud. Then the Etzem Seichel Harav is Nishpa Ela Talmud, and therefore Bibalas Mahus Ha'ora, therefore it remains with him at Sof Kemei Chayav with the ganze Arichas, like we saw in the Maila, the Amshoches HaSeichel Me'arav HaTalmud. In a similar Inyan, the Amshoche Elokis Alidei is bonnen as Adam Alidei Avedas Adam that is misbeinen in the Gödel HaIker, Elokus is the Iker Kol HaElemet, and his whole rotzen, his whole chuk is only to Elokus, is Alidei Zeh. He's Makabel the Etzem Mahus, even though it's only a or Bilvad, Kemuva. And the same with the Inyan of the Chayes in the Guf, which is Nimshach Be'ike through the Koyches of the Nefesh. Well, that's only a Ha'ora, but that Mahus Ha'ora in Mislabish in the Evrei HaGuf. But it's not the case with the Inyan of the Sairis. And we saw that the Inyan from the Chayes are Nimshach, but Sairis is, albeit from the Etem, it's well known that the, I think we discussed it, that the Chayes from the Moyach is Nimshach into the Cyrus. The Cyrus are Mekabel, the Chayes from the Moyach Mamish. Or the Cyrus Azokon in a maybe slightly higher, or even also from the Inan Moyach. However, it goes through the Etzema Gulgelet. There's a tremendous hefsek in the Gilui Amshocha, which is mafsik legamre the Oifen Chayes, until it's not really shy to dimensions magish the Chayes in the Cyrus. It's only if they're pulled, but then they in some way reach into their mokia. If he pulls out a hair, then it reaches into the mokia. Then he feels a certain reaction or pain, or if you cut the hair's stem horizontally, then you don't feel it. That's because the hefsek is so great that it's only even a feel like Gabi the Mahus Ha'ora, that's only a Ha'ora Bilvad, and in that Gufa, a Ha'ora Mitzum Tzemes Ma'id. But that's the Indian of the Cyrus. Kamoi Kain Hu Bi Avo. The Kihu Chayecha, in that Madreg of Ava, the Kihu Chayecha, Charlie Day said, Nimshalo Gile Achayes Elaki, Zosha Nimshalo Gile Mahusa or Elaki Smami. So it's a mile, or a Gedele in that Indian that the mensch is Mamish Kabel, Kaviolo, from the Eibishter, Indian Achmi, Indian Aora. Mahusius mamish betech chayo, betech chaya yom yom is meya in him, not just a ha'ora or a inyan from hasoge in Elkus, but the Eibush is mamish meya in him, and yesh lema the diuk is where after Hashem alakecha ki hucha chayecha, that the nasinas time after Ma'ava is not just that you understand that he is chayecha. Yeah, in other words, the pasuk would be mechayev you to understand that. Of a state should love him ki hu chayecha. In other words, that's an asinas time of the motivation for that ava. And what is the motivation? Ki hu chayecha. He's mamish your chayim. So what's the over mentioned in nish misbeinen in them? What if he's not misbeinen? It was demot. But he doesn't have the Mahus Ha'ora, he's also alive. Now we have to say, that's what's a Mavua, I said, zwei certain Chayes, I feel in this level of Chayes. In other words, there's a Chayes when we are mensch, the old expression has it, he asked by certain people, how are they, in Mashlimon? I say, oh, my left, my left. Some people even sort of, Bekel Anais Chalusha, and sort of my left. In other words, that you're just alive, meaning that the ha'or elakis is nimshach, but not an oif of mahus. It's just kaviyachol the Eivsher, how do you say, he's prepared to keep you going, he's prepared to keep you alive. But where the mensch makes a kli, and that's the whole meaning, that av is a kli. Every form of bittul is a kli. He makes a kli amitius, the bittul, the is born in us. So then the Eivsher sends him not only just a chayas, just to keep him alive, even from yesh miyayin, but the Eivsher sends him a ha'ora elakis, which is nimshak b'chayov. Therefore we see that people, as they open a chush, they push a sense elakus, and they're aware of elakus b'chol inyoneim, b'chol chayeyim, they're sensitive to inyone elakus. They wouldn't cholila do anything which aipach elakus v'kaitzah b'zeh. That's a defa, but the mahus ha'ora is taka mishkalah to them. And that's a chiddush got there. Auch upon him a dogma von dem in the etzem am shocher, as a nefesh in the goof, is that the union of the Koiches HaNefesh Adamaya in the Guf, that's also Mahus HaOra.
Is this the same union as Shmiya that we learned in
Shmiya?
that we learned in Kikar HaShamayim?
The union of Shmiya. Yeah, it's not Mamish Riyah, because it's based on the union Shal HaSoga. Riyah is more connected with the union of Chochmah. This is connected with the union Shal HaSoga. I was very point out that Riyah side to the union of Chochmah. And even Lamayla Mitzvah, even in Timus V'Atzmus HaChochmah. It's not Mamishini from Re'iyah of Al-Choponim, Yoisha Korov Mi'asher Rochek. You follow? Good. So that's the union of the difference between Mahus HaOra and the Siders. Ava, Ba'ir Ein Seif Shalom Haila Mi'ishtav Shalas, Mishom Ha'amshochu B'chinas Siders Levod. That's all in the union of the Mahus HaOra, which comes into the Slapshus. I'm sorry, what was the sentence? On Mazel Davke Ba'ora to say the Stauslet. Of Hisha HaOra Zois, Bo B'chinas Slapshus Mamish Boilamas. Or Machaye B'chinas Shefa. Canal. Olachin Bozeh Shayach Hamshochas HaMahus Mamish. That's the whole definition of Shefa as we've defined it on numerous occasions at Koi. That's Kabiyohu, the Maila of Seidi Stausels, that everybody is mavin. The union Stauselis is only a low madrege in the Gile Elakuz. But upon him, the Maila of his Stauselis is that it's Nimshach, a union from Mahus HaOra into the different madreges, if there are Klilas there. And that's the Maila of Histauselis, how it's meant to be BMS, that the Kli is Makabel the Mahus HaOra if it's only a Kli. Ma'ashein is said in there, Avo Ba'ir Ein Seif Shalom Haila Mi'Histauselis. In other words, in the Madreges of Elakusa is Bugoloi Ba'lam Haila Mi'Histauselis. Mishom Am Shocha B'chinas Cyrus, Levad. From there, the whole Am Shocha is only B'derech Cyrus. Lafisha Mishom Nimshach HaChayis B'chinas Oyer, V'loi B'chinas Shefa. She'ein Ze Hamshochas HaMahus K'moi She'yiz. But we're going to see that the union Oyer is not Hamshochas HaMahus Klau. But K'moi She'yiz Boyer, as we're going to be explaining very soon. Ochein Mishom Hamshocha Hi B'chinas Cyrus Levad. Well, that sentence needs a bit of a view. Was it the kilo the Nakuda was there? But the Rebbe says that that makes sense. That the higher we go, then the more difficult it is that we should be able to give Mahus from that Madrega. Because the higher we go closer to Elakuz, then if we were Megara the Mahus, then the never would be Botter, he wouldn't be able to be Makabel. Therefore, where can he be Makabel Mahus? Only in the level of Histauselis. But what's the union of since it's Lamaila Histauselis, therefore the Amshach is only Cyrus, Lefi, what Lefi, the word Lefi means because, Mishom Nimshach HaChayis B'chinas Oyer. Well, that's not Hamshochas HaMahus. Well, in Mishom Hamshocha B'chinas Cyrus. L'chera, if it's not Mahus, if it's not Hamshochas HaMahus, then what's the problem? Where it's Hamshochas HaMahus, then I understand that the higher I go up, I can't have it being Hamshochas HaMahus, because then the Makablim wouldn't be able to wouldn't be able to Makabel it. So, what do I mean by saying no? The whole reason for that is the reason why we can't have Hamshoch and Mahus, we have to have Cyrus, because not Mahus, it's only even Oyer, not Mahus. And therefore we have to have only Cyrus Bilvad. That's absolutely Kokach Mistader, Etzema Emshech Aloshan Hazeh. Lochein Mishom Hamshoch B'chinas Cyrus, Dafki, because it's not Hamshoch Mahus, Lochein, therefore, Mishom, it's only Indian from Cyrus, Bilvad, and not the Indian from Mahus. If it's only Oyer, and Oyer is not the Indian from Hamshochas HaMahus Klau, then what's the problem? Why do we have to have a dafki b'derech tzayres? So we have to say that Indian is misbayer yesel barichas behemshech ha'inyan. We're moving now close to the step into a new Indian, which is the whole beer and oil, not chef. However, every Indian has to sort of hold together b'derech ha'pashtas. Then we have to say that the Indian van ain't safe. Shalamayla mi shtaushlas. What is it, Taich? What's it doing our oil shalamayla mi shtaushlas? After all, what is shtaushlas? Shtaushlas begins from the Tzimtzum Harishon and further. Lamaisa, Lapoyo. If you start already with the Indian van Ak and then Akudim and Nikudim and oil ma'atzilas, that's all a gather of shtaushlas. All the different oilamas mishtaushlim b'derech oilas b'kelim. After people b'pnimis Ak, you can't very well talk about kelim. Afila b'akudim, it's only kli achas. It's not really the immediate abasof kosov. The oilas are already being, as we might call, madudim in such a way that they'll be nimshach in the kelim, and lapoil they are nimshach in the kelim. Even in oilama anikudim, which is oilama toyu, there's also a certain gilui that is in the kelim kiyadua. Of a lamayla miatzimtzum harishain, then you can't call that ishtaushlas. So in came, what do we need oil? Lamayla mishtaushlas, just make melchatchila. Make melchatchila shtaushlas, and right from the beginning it'll just be shtaushlas. It won't be any oil, so lamayla mishtaushlas. Like the famous, it's almost similar to the Shaila what the Arizal is, a famous Shaila from the Arizal, what the Rabbi Chaim Vital brings at Bishmoi. What do we need the whole Indian or the Tzimtzum for? What do you need to take away everything and then bring back a cow? Make melchatchila a cow. Why David said first of all be mayor oil, which was mamish ain't say. Then he took it all away and then he brought back a cow. It was make melchatchila. Just a cow. So we have to open the guns oil and then take it away and bring it back. So the teretz over there is another teretz. The teretz was written in the Eitz Chaim is a teretz that was for the sake of the Indian from Gilu HaKelim. We found that the Kelim come inside the Indian at Tzimtzum. As if we hadn't made an Indian from Tzimtzum, no matter what sort of oil we would have been Megala into the Kelim, the oil would have been kilo as it were Mavatal the Kelim. The Kelim wouldn't have been able to Mekabel the oil. And therefore we had to give the kilo the Kelim a Kuyach and a Metziz B'Shnei Atzmo, Blia oil. Then after that we can be, as it were, Mamshicha oil into them. It's well known the ganze beer that teretz in the Eitz Chaim. Although upon him benegeh linyonenu, what is negeh to our union is that Eibishter wanted it to be a whole series of giluim. They were really gilui atzmoi. They were giluim how he was being Megala himself. And albeit he's only doing that for derech oyer, although upon him the whole union of oyer is to be Megala him, and you can't do that derech shefa, because what you give with shefa is not really yourself at all. It's only a union which you for the sake of the makabel. I shake in the union of oyer how it is lamayla mi ishtaushla. That's really gilia ayat. That's what the Rebbe means. That if I go lamayla mi ishtaushla, then the giluim are giluim achmim. They're giluim of the etzem. Why David want that? Because that's what he wanted. That ultimately we go beyond the shtausels and we should be able to bring down a fellow Gilead Shmusa Yisbara. A Gilead from him, not a Gilead which is shot to us. No, a Gilead which is him mami. And that's in you from Dira B'Taktenim with the ganze Inyan and the ganze Riches B'Inyonim Eilu. Edifar, they had to be as it were Giluim L'mayla Mishtausel. So since Giluim L'mayla Mishtausel, they're Giluim of the Eibishter himself, not Giluim to the Makablim. No, they're Giluim of the Eibishter himself, and that's the Pshat L'mayla Mishtausel. From there can only be a Inyan Fan Tzayir. Therefore he says Therefore, it has to be a ha'ora mimenu. If it was shefa, then Aina, which would be nimshir, b'derech shefa, mi'atzmusa is borach, that's just not shayach, it should be mishkabel in the elam cloud. And if we have to say that gilui mimenu, which is gilui l'mayla mishtal, which is gilui mi'aetzem, that's b'derech ha'ora. And the maila of ha'ora is that you can be megala the whole etzem in the ha'ora, and at the same time, you're not megala anything of the etzem. That's the maila of the inyan of ha'ora. It's well known, and we'll see as we go along here very shortly, that ha'ora has in itself the maila. On the one hand, it's not from the etzem, klal, and yet on the other hand, it's a gilui of the etzem. And therefore, that's what he ties the two inyanim together. And since it's the maila mi'ishtaushel is, ha'olam is, and therefore it had to be in a oven, and it's in a oven from oyer bilvad. And therefore, the only way it can be nimshach siders, because it's in from oyer, not shefa. It can only be nimshach siders, because the mila, as we're going to learn in oyer, the mila from oyer is mamish gilui ha'etzem. Mamish gilui ha'etzem can only be nimshach b'derech siders, because b'derech mahus, what that's in from shefa, then the element can't be makabel klavu. It can be makabel mahus is only after below. Okay, everything's only ha'ora bilvad for the sake of hishtaushel. Then they can be makabel mahus. Kein yeshlema, that is what he means. That's what he connects the two inyanim. Being only a inyan from amshochus ha'ora bilvad with the inyan of achein, and therefore it can only come b'derech siders. And the inyan from siders, like we saw, is a tremendous timtum. And therefore we find that all the amshochus from the Moshe Atik and all those madrigas which are gilui ha'etzem, all of them come by way of siders. The well known that the siders from Atik to Moichas Timor, and the siders from Moichas Timor down further, and from Arich, and from here and from there. Everything is different madrigas in the Indian of siders. Kiyadua Mafursum Bazeh, but that's got to do also with the Indian from Siders Azokon, that they have the maila that they're gilui ha'etzem more than the Siders HaRosh, what are more after there's already been a certain yerid of a tzimtzum, then there are gilui, there are Siders, which means there are lower madrega and a much more tzimtzum dike madrega, therefore there can be a certain unique lechitanium from the Siders HaRosh. Bein bezocha bein benekeva, particularly in the inyan of benekeva, that's why they have to cut off there, v'chule. And that's why it's also known by the Zecharim that they also go beside his mitzumtzomis, not to be megadol the inyan from the Siders. So you can say that of the Rosh. What about the Nazir? So the answer is that the Nazir, he's because of the Kedusha, that he's poil in himself, then even in his Siders there's a tremendous gilui of Kedusha in the Siders. As they say in Yiddish, a shpar tzecharain, just itself turk into the Siders, a tremendous Kedusha. As well known, also brought down Barichas in Derech Mitzvah Batinin of the Nazir. Achapanim, says the Rebbe, that's the inyan of the Siders coming from the Lamaila Mishtaushlas. The only possibility is Derech Siders, even though it's a inyan from oil. And on the contrary, we're going to see that's the Maila of the inyan from oil. Ubeze Yuvan Mashematzinu Ba'etz Chaim Gam Kein Loshen Shefa. And now we'll understand, we just said that all the Mukubalim, they use the Loshen oil and the Loshen Shefa. And as we find in Rov Mekaimus, in the Kisvei Arizal, they talk about oil. He doesn't use the word shefa so much. However, we do find in certain places, even in the Kisvei Arizal, the inyan of the word shefa. Shehuinin amshochas hamahus. I haven't that fit in with oil. I mean, if he's talking about oil, then amshochas hamahus is not oil. The Yeshleima Shazahu Biabchines Ashayochim Lo Elames. That when the Arizal is talking about inyanim which are mamish shayach to the inyan of Elames, the Bezeh shayach inyan shefa, shu amshochas Mahus ha'ora shebo b'chinas islapshus. When he's talking about the inyan van Olamus, then you can of a mamish the which is mamish shayt to Olamus, and the whole Gila Eloki, which is only in Olamus and shayt to them. Then in certain places, albeit not in all, but in certain places, he does use the word shefa. So the Rebbe said we have to say that he's talking about the inyan of the hamshochas mahus ha'ora, which comes with sort of the whole shefa is connected with inyan ha'slapshus, that it comes in slapshus bo'elamus. Avu b'madrege shalamayla me'olamas hamshocha hi b'chinas oya v'loy b'chinas shefa. All those places where he talks about inyanim which are all shayt to lamayla me'olamas, then you would never find the word shefa. You'd only find the word Uya. And also the truth is that the Lashon Shefa in the words of the Arizal is rare. It's not something which he uses always or constantly. It's only one or two or three places we find that he says in a whole chapter they use the concept Shefa. So the Rebbe says that in order to avoid that somebody might come up and say, well, he found in the Eitz Chaim he found in the Mekubalim a Lashon Shefa. So the Rebbe said, it could be that you might find the Lashon Shefa. But if you do, it'll only be in that oil which is mamish in Ishtaushlas and comes with the slabshus in the kelim of Ishtaushlas. Therefore, it's only talking about the Aminin from Hamshochas Mahus ha'ora. What we saw is that the inyan of the usage of the word shefa, like we saw, that is referring to inyan Mahus. Only a ha'ora albeit, but the mahus of that ha'ora, however, of a lower ha'ora already shayt to oilamas and to ishtaushlas. So that's more or less summing it up, the whole inyan of shefa, and we've already made some ramazim to the differences between that and oil. Behine, it's like now a new beginning of a new chapter almost. Tehine inyan oyer hu shezehu racha ore levad loy mahus hadova klau. Shefa we saw is a mahus, albeit the very beginning maybe already a ha'ora only. But whatever you got to give in whatever you prepared ready to give, then you give it exactly the way it is. It is. That's the taich. I'm sure it's hamahus. So he said that the inyan van oyer is not like that at all in its some definition. The very definition of oyer is racha ha'ora va'ein b'zeh mahus dovo klau. In other words, we see that a luminescence, something which just shines off from a etem, doesn't have any mahus of the etem in it, klau, and its whole essence itself is that it's not a mahus dova. For example, the oil that goes off from the shemesh, you can't point at the earth and say, oh, here we have oil and this is a mahus. Ha'oil and this is oil. It's kilo dova she'einoi be'etem. So you might say, well, scientists can use all sorts of different sort of what do they call it? This thing that they catch different colors in the earth. Prisms, and all sorts of masses. That doesn't really make the oil into a mahus, but it just sort of breaks up some of the, the light or the aspects of light, and makes it reveal other colors, or like 80%. Yeah.
If from a ha'ara you don't get anything, there's no mahus to it, how come the ha'ara which made the olamais, from that you can make a shefa? So it makes that. There's a mahus to it in this world, but when it was brought down as or, there was no mahus.
Well, So, I understand what you're asking, that if we say that the whole thing which is shayt to ishtaushus is only a ha'ora, then what do you mean by mahus ha'ora? That's what you're asking.
Yeah.
Okay, so the nakuda is that ein hanami ha'ora is meant to be a ha'ora. Is meant aim is in an amuz. That's what you're asking. So what's shot to say mahus ha'ora?
Well,
that's kilo the shayla.
In the olamos, there's shefa. But the olamos themselves are just ha'ara.
Olam themselves are just ha'ara. What you're asking is if olams themselves are just ha'ara, then what's shaykh mahus in the ha'ara? What's shaykh mahus ha'ara? That's clear the zah. So we'll see as we go along that the teva of oil, when I say the teva, the inyan of oil, is that it always remains mudal be'etzem inyone from the dover that it's shira alov or halal. For example, if you have oil shemesh shining on, you take so many square yards of Chabad, you say the oil shemesh is shining on that whole area. Is it enough kamina to anything in that area? You know, what does the oil enter certain parts more than, or does it have an effect on certain things more than on others? The oil just rests on all of them in an absolutely equal way, which is of no nagia cloud whatsoever to the inyan of oil. In other words, that oil be'etzem minyone is that even though it's meir, it remains betachas ha'avdola. So it's the same nafkamina to the oil if it's meir through the window of the palace of the king, or it's meir on the rubbish heap. In kol nafkamina, you can't be able to say, "Oh, look at that piece of oil from the shemesh." You know, you see how it's really trying to keep away from the rubbish heap, or in the king's palace, or that is very willingly through the window and shines. Shayat to say davar kazeh?
No.
Not shayat to say cloud. In other words, oil in its very essence is mudal. And therefore we'll see that the truth of the matter is that even the moel, the gavi the oil, is also v'tachas havdola. Even though, in a way, he's not, but he is. Mashakin b'shefa, we can't, and we didn't say that. What we do is, with a shefa, we say that we take that mahus ha'ora and we alter it all. So ha'ora keeps out of everything, like we said. Ha'ora is be'etzem ha'maki. To turn a ha'ora mamish into a pnimi, or that's already derech shefa. To take a ha'ora and make him go into something, and make him give what he has, mamish inside, a kli, that the kli mamish interacts with him, well, that's not in the inyan of an oil beklal. That's not the teva of oil beklal to do that. You got that in? In other words, we like you made that sun, oil of the sun, you made the rubbish heap be ashamed of itself that the oil is shining inside it. That the oil is coming mamish into the rubbish heap. Whatever the rubbish heap, I got this oil entering into me. How am I going to be a kli to it? How am I going to react to it? Then the answer would be, don't be a rubbish heap. Be always rubbish heap. Then you'll be able to be mikabel there, but pnimi years. Aber ein davar gezegd, the etzem inyan of oil is that it's not a davar which is meir bekli or bepnimi. And then we're going to see that what oil and kli get together in olam atzilus, for example, and mamel and the other olamas, each one lefi inyone, that's going to be a tremendous inquiry. How does the oil be meir into kli? As brought down, it's only Mesiras Nefesh on the part of the oil. But the oil is mamish Mesiras Nefesh to do that. Because mitzad atzmai, the oil is a dova hamuda. That's the chilek. And that means that oil, wherever it's meir, is like that. I feel the oil akav, which has already been muda, they're children. Or vibaldas is oil, miyain amoya, the oil akav mitzad atzmai, it's also like that. To be mamish mamshir into a pnimius inside kihu chayecha, and that the makabel feels that's chayo, and therefore he loves the mokim mitzad that. But that's an inyan for shefa, that's another inyan already. You follow? Somebody's had to work hard, or somebody's had to have some sort of Mesiras Nefesh kaviyachol to do that. And that's all inyan for what we saw. The mashpia, he's a mensch that he gives away, his whole what you might call comfort, and he's misasik in the inyanim to see that they get. And of course, the shinuim, gedolim bi'atzmai v'chulu. You follow? It's a very good question with you. What does the biur b'dover? In other words, it comes out that we're so used to it, instead of using the word oyer, that we forget that oyer is really a dover mutal. Oyer is the highest way of saying that something doesn't really have to do with anything. And yet, nonetheless, we do make it have to do with certain inyanim, and eventually even enter a kli, and that's a tremendous shaila. How's that going to happen? And how does it actually happen? And in a way, it never really happens. I mean, the truth of the matter is, it's only sort of certain madrigas in the earth that actually enter the kli. When I say certain madrigas, certain oifanim in the gila of the earth which enter the keli. That's why we say that even in Atzilus there's a Yerushalayim Me'aked. The earth just can't. It's not able to enter kelim to my definition. Alright, so he said that however it's only a ora levad, she'ein boi min ha'etzem klal. Im hi yoish ha'ora, hi me'ein ha'etzem. Even despite the fact that the hora is me'ein ha'etzem. How do you call it? It is similar to or partaking of the etzem. So that's really basically putting the whole thing in one sentence. That oyer is on the one hand ha'ora bilad, it's only a luminescence which has nothing to do with the etzem, klal. On the other hand, it's me'ein ha'etzem, that there's a certain essential gilui of the mo'er, of the source of the earth, in the light, without it being in any way affecting the very essence of the mo'er. And that's what we call me'ein, as we saw about at Barichas in some of the earlier Monday. It's me'ein ha'etzem. For example, the etzem hashemesh bohiro, the very essence of the shemesh is what we call luminescent. Luminescent. Bahir. The far mamela ha'oyer hu meir. The fire of the earth that goes off from it, it literally gives light. In other words, the shemesh is be'etzem like a burning entity of luminescence. Therefore, it's called a luminary. In the way we translate it, it's called a luminary, meaning that it's illuminated in its very essence. It's like the essence of illumination. Therefore, the ha'ora that goes off from it is also a dover which in Yoni is lahoyer. And if I say, that the oil, wherever it goes, it brings the message of the etzem, the hainu, that it lights up. However, the difference is that the shemesh is what we call, that's called bahir, pirush, that's luminescence, be'etzem. And the oil is already what we call oil laho here. In other words, the kuda being, in a way, what we're saying is that the shemesh is not to be meir to anything. The shemesh is just a etzem meir. It's what we call a etzem meir. That's a taich bahir. But it's not really, busy, or it's not really in any way lighting up anything. It's just there, what it is. What causes the shemesh to light up something and to actually bring luminescence to a makabel? That's the oil. In other words, that the oil which goes off from the shemesh, or that busies itself, as it were. It doesn't busy itself, but al chaponim, it does bring with it the infant lahoir. And therefore, the Rebbe said that's infant oil hamei ear. You can't call the shemesh meir. The shemesh is meir, but only ali day the oil. The shemesh itself is not meir. And that was the Rebbe, that's the inyan van oyer ha-meir. Omikol mokim, ein boi me'etzem klal. On the other hand, it gives over that what the shemesh is like, but it doesn't have anything in it from the shemesh. It just absolutely of no significance to the shemesh at all. And it doesn't carry in itself the etzem ha-shemesh at all. V'lochein, ein ha'etzem nitfas o mislabish. Exactly the opposite. It's put down in certain drushim. It's the opposite of shefa. We saw that in shefa the mashpia is mamish nitfas and he's mislabish in the giving off of his shefa. But here the ma'or or the very source of the oil, is not in any way caught or mislavish in giving off the oil. Shaharei ha'oil nimsha b'derech meila mi'ashemesh ve'ein tzorich shum tilda yisaskes be'ashemesh lahoya oil ela meir meila. That's the difference being with shefa. We saw that there has to be a busyness and a tilde on the part of the mashpia, like we saw the example that seichel lo yumshak me atma. Even he has a seichel and he wants to get it to the makabel, it's not just going to go on it. It only has to be misasik and mutrad to give over the seichel to the makabel. The shemesh, for example, giving off light, it's not busy with giving off light. It doesn't in any way have to be busy within itself, or mutrad in any way preoccupied or taken up with giving off light. It's just the Indian which goes b'derech mamela. Since the shemesh is a etzem bohiri, and if our light just goes off from a b'derech mamela, b'li kol isaskis or tfisa or islapshis b'zeh on the part of the shemesh klalu. And so that's the Indian of the moshel of oyer. It's meir mamela. Ukemoikein ein tzorich hisaskes lahoya babayis. Yeah, so even to a certain extent, that's been again to the shemesh giving off the actual light. Since the light is only a ha'ora bilvad, and he's not really a inyan mahusi, and therefore he doesn't have to be misasik lahoya Abayis el mamela nasa oyer babay. Yeah, so it's like a two-time winner, as you might say, the moya. On the one hand, the moya doesn't have to be misasik to give off light, and the light doesn't have to be misasik with the makabel. It's not that the light is busy giving off light into the room or derech chalon or wherever it might happen. In other words, sai mitzad the etzem moya, and sai mitzad the oyer itself, everything is b'derech mamela. It all just happens, and it all equally settles on every place. Bliko inyan of care or istadlus l'gabi eizem makabel sheiyeh. That's what we saw. Yeah, it can be mayor in the room of a palace, or it can be mayor in the rabbishim. And that's what the Gemara says in Masechta Sanhedrin, is Doroshan. In the Gemara, where it says that Shimsha Akuli Alma Naicha, that the Shemesh rests on the whole world. It just comes down, and it just appears over the whole world. B'liko nachkimina la Shemesh. That's what the Gemara means. That's what the Rebbe says here. Therefore, there's no busyness, not on the part of the Ma'or, not on the part of the Shemesh, not on the part of the Earl, Abayis, but it happens b'derech mamela. Okay, for example, Shemechamemim matechois boish. If you want to heat some form of metal with fire, yeah. So what do? You bring a fire, a source of fire, close to the metal, and it just heats it up. I missed a line. Yeah, what that means? I'm sorry. Eino b'derech hisaskes ki'im b'derech mamela. K'may kein ma shemayira habayis u'b'derech mamela. That was just taking a more practical example of the inyan of neya. So the neya now is like the shemesh. The itzim ner itself, that's the ma'or, and the oil which goes off from it, is meir es habayis. So he says that the neya is not misasik lahoyer es habayis. Neither the oil goes off from it either. Just automatically. The Alter brings in Pei Kotes. The Alter Rebbe says that the choshech nidche b'derech mamela mi ha'oil. Miat oil doiche haba mina choshech, he brings over there. But he adds the Alter Rebbe choshech nidche b'derech mamela mi ha'oil. In other words, once the oil advances, then the choshech just backs out of the way. It's not that the earth fights the choshech, because the whole inyan of neir and oyer is what you might call hashpua, or effect, only b'derech mamela. For example, another example, that if we heat metals with fire, the ash doesn't have to be busy, the ash doesn't have to make an effort to heat the piece of metal, it just does it b'derech mamela. So you might say, if it's a schwache fire, they don't want to heat the metal very much at all. If it's a big fire, it'll heat. Well, that depends not on the etzem relationship of the fire to the metal. It depends on whether it's a good fire or it's a small fire, or it's a big fire, or a schwache fire, or a starke fire. It doesn't mean that a stronger fire is more busy, more able to be busy and use its muscles in order to heat the metal. It's all dependent purely on the etzem relationship. That once the fire is close to the metal, then automatically the metal gets heated. It just depends a little on the quality of the fire. The gilui achoim mihoish ubederech mamela. The chom mihoish is just automatic. Ukamoi kain zeh shemachamim es amatechois ubederech mamela. In other words, like we saw, in both levels it's true. First of all, the actual harm from the fire is b'derech mamela. The fire doesn't have to work to give off heat, and the heat doesn't have to work at the metal either. It just gives off, it just reaches the metal and gives over its message from the air. So that was it. Both things are true, like we just saw. Sometimes we see that they come along with the old smithies in the old days. They come along with a thing that blows up, makes the fire blow stronger. What do they call it?
Bellows.
Huh? Bellows. Yofi. We see the Rebbe said, Yomasha nafochim noifchim b'mafoach shalahem. Sometimes we see that the smithies, these guys will make, they change metal by heat and they make it into different things. Smithies, the guys that they make horseshoes and all this sort of thing. That they're noifchim b'mafoach shalahem. That they literally blow at. The word mafoach means to blow, but they don't blow with their mouths. They blow with a mafoach. A mafoach is this thing he just called a bellows. So he said shalahem boaish. Zeu rak lekarev es ha'esh el ha'matechas, or lahoitzi es ha'esh me'ahelem el ha'gilui, ki efshar lehikovetz. It could be that it's about to extinguish. So therefore they blow at it. So the blowing at it doesn't actually make that the fire's not going to heat the metal. In other words, that if they didn't blow, then the fire wouldn't heat the metal. It could be that if they didn't blow, the fire mightn't heat the metal for two reasons: that maybe it's not close enough, or it's got so schwach that it can't heat the metal anyway. So therefore they blow it up. But it's not that the fact that we blew at the ash, that therefore the ash became more strong, therefore it's able to heat the metal, in that the ash is now changed, b'etzem. It's either just the ash which has got more ability to give off its heat, or less ability to give off its heat. Or the giving off the heat, and the heat affecting the metal, is over b'derech mamela, and it's only dependent in the mafoach, not in the etzem relationship of the heat to the metal. It's the mafoach is only to improve and to make the ma'or, which is the source of the ash, a proper source of ash. Or it doesn't actually change the relationship of heat of the ash to the metal. So either to bring it closer to the matechas, or to make the fire blow up again, because it's possible that it may have been on its way to go out. He said, the etzem heat which passes into the mateches is not through anybody's ishtadlers. That's a dover which happens all on it. Okay, my cane said the Rebbe Hashemesh Meir Mamela es Abayes. Shaloi Alidei is askes. And when the Shemesh is Meir into a room, or really more correctly, the oil of the Shemesh is Meir into the room, then you can't say that anybody is making an effort to light up the room. I myself, if I pull aside the curtains and I pull in something else and I do it, then I get better results. But you didn't make the oil work any harder. You didn't make the shemesh work any harder. You took away things which are moineya, the etzem gila of the shemesh. Yeah, you're not in any way changing the. But since it's not, there's no busyness on the part of the moya, there's no isaskas, therefore ain't oil poil shimshini be'ashemesh. Not like we saw by Shefa. So by Shefa we discussed Bariches, the Dafki, because he's mutrad and it causes a difference in him between how he was before and how he is B'Shas Ma'aser, how he is even afterwards. There's sometimes even occurs in him milas for the inyan of the Shefa. At here, ain't with a shum hisaskas whatsoever, just being what it is, automatically it gives forth the oil, and whatever effect oil the oil has, that's what it does. Everything is just, even of mamela. Lachin says the Rebbe ain't oil poil shum shinoi be'ashemesh. Because of that, since there's no busyness or tirda, therefore the oil doesn't cause any alteration in the shemesh. The kasher nimshacha oil aim is a shum toisefes ba shemesh. He said, if the oil is nimshach, that doesn't add anything to the shemesh. Let's say that the oil does go through the windows and it does meir the palace, then you can't say, "Ooh, the shemesh is pleased." It's a big inyan with the shemesh worked so hard that it should. Now it's getting somewhere. Okay, these inyanim have no what you might call nafkamina relationship to the shemesh. Foresight to say, isn't it good that the shemesh was working very well today? It was aiming very good and it was having very good saskis today. The shemesh therefore got the oil even into my window. We have to be thankful. Now, vulai, maybe that's one of the shtusim that they fell into, but there are Yeridus Hadoros. They came lavi. This is one of the Rambam's must be taught in Hilchos Tiny. Hilchos Avodah Zarah, I'm sorry. At the beginning, the Rambam must be how the world fell into the inyan of, because they thought that maybe the shemesh has got some sort of a bit of a koyach of its own to decide to give you and to, in some way, how do you call it, benefit you independently from its maker. In other words, it was made, it was given certain powers, and now that's a yasha koyach to the shemesh that it decided to give you, even kozevako. That's it. That would be based on a ihabona in these inyanim. It's not the shemesh. The shemesh doesn't make any decisions or in any way misachik klalu. Just being what it is, you automatically adam mekabel. And if says the Rebbe, ein mizeh shum toisefes be'ah Hashem. Okay, and similarly, if we spread a sheet lifnei oyer hashemesh, in other words, a sadin means something in this case thick. It doesn't allow the shemesh to shine to the makablim on the other side of the sadin. Oi kasher hashamayim miskasim be'ovim, or if the heavens become covered with clouds, and therefore the Oyer HaShemesh doesn't get through those clouds, it doesn't make any, what you might call, lacking or negation or cancelling out in the Shemesh. Now also the Shaila, an intelligent reader is Masera, what do I need, the positive and the negative? Why do I need to say if the shemesh is matzliach kilo and its oil is meir and it achieves all the different things that air is supposed to be meir, then that doesn't add anything. There's shum tosefes klal in the shemesh. But why do I have to add that if I don't allow it to be meir, that doesn't cause any giron in the shemesh? What's the chiddush of that? If I've already said one, it's ki'ilu moving b'dar mamer the other. The fact there's a whole piece in Ayin Beis, but the truth is that's a very profound piece in Ayin Beis, very very profound inyan. What mi inyan lo inyan, but it's a inyan. Like the Gemara says, that the Rebbe goes on there to another sort of shah which indirectly affects this whole argument. We're not going to go into it, but upon him, the Rebbe asks over there that what do we mean sometimes by saying the positive when I get to the earth, and then we negate. We say that even if it's not able to shine the shemesh, for all sorts of reasons, then it doesn't affect the shemesh klal. So what I understand over there, what it appears to be the nekuda, is that we see that all inyonim, and that's also brought in Chassidus Parichas, all inyonim need what you might call exercise. All inyonim need a function of their kohen. Now, we saw, for example, in the inyan of shefa, that we saw that if the mashpia is not mashpia, then that can cause a gradual weakening in his whole power to understand. But we pointed out it's only if he's not mashpia klal, not even to himself. It's like there's a header in the Indian, then that's a sign that in the koicha it could be that they'll settle in that giroin. In other words, if you don't use certain koichas, it's like if you don't take exercise, then the koichas of the body also tend to weaken up. They tend to lose their effectivity. So, what the Rabbi means with this negative, he says it's no tosefes in the shemesh if it's ma'ir, and also if it's not ma'ir, it's not a giron in the shemesh. The Rabbi is coming to be negate another possible thing that a person might want to compare the inyan of oil to shefa. And he might want to say that we see that a thing which doesn't do what it's supposed to do, so that is pu'el giroin in the dover. In other words, if you have any form of yechoilus to be megala a certain thing, and you're not megala it, then that means that you're not going to be as effective in that, and you might even to a certain extent lose it. Or the example, I give a very gashmin stick of mushel the phone. I got an email before from somebody. He asked me a shaila that if in the 3 weeks he's allowed to practice on his piano because it's nagir to his panosa, number one. And he says, and Zweitens, he says nagir to the ability of his fingers to be effective on the notes. That if he goes a couple of weeks and he doesn't, play, then his fingers lose they're not as effective as they should be, and it takes him a while to rebuild it. And immediately after the 3 weeks, he's going to be invited to play a different place. And if his fingers are not to do this, then he's not going to be able to play it. Kachu kotevli. In that email that you gave, I state as Ashai. Is he allowed to practice at least in the 3 weeks? In the 9 days, weiß ich nicht. Aber auch upon him, I think there's a heter at least in the 2 weeks up until the 9 days, because since it's a inyan of pure shmiras, ilus hakoichois, that it's mutter, as long as not done, beribuya, haflogim, beribuya simcha, it's purely done with some practice. I mean, probably you can play certain pieces that don't have any particular beauty, or just using the actual notes. That's what I'm going to suggest to him. Over upon him, we see that whether the goof has got any ability, or just the goof, any inyan which has an ability to express itself, then if it's not used, then it can cause a heder in the minyan. And the pain can go both ways. The first of all, I say that it doesn't cause any islabshus. Oh, but maybe by not using itself, by not giving off oil, but maybe there's some way that the union of the shemesh will be affected by that, and therefore they warn that no, even that is not shaykh klau, that it ain't cold enough committed whether the oil is ma'ir or it's not ma'ir, lo being in a toisefes, but they're chiyu, and lo being in a giroyim, but they're shlil. And that's kiu adova ha'in in neisa. But over there, there are effect andere shaykh. When I get to the union from kabona, he says, so close off the Abish as a kabona in all these inyanim. As if it's not nimshach, and wouldn't that be a giron and a kavona? So those who say ain't kind of among laharik bezer beregazeh. That's a very darkest shaila and again be'etzem ma'avona shall come in yonim, but sidders ish laharik bezer ain't kind of among laharik bezer. And the Taish is that the Abish is so withdrawn from everything, even the moya is so withdrawn from the mudam, that the Avdol is so great that all these inyanim are only b'derech retain bilvad. Like we said, he doesn't really want, he just allows himself to look as if he wants for the sake of Olam, reaching the Kabbalim, okay, it doesn't really, the Etzem Kavanah is not really nogea to him. He made it nogea for the sake of the Makabbalim. Why did he do that? On that the Alter Rebbe said, Ein anu yoy, what's that the Rangelot in us? I mean, Inyan, Ein anu yoy. But that's a quick sketch of the view. I mean, so. However you're going to say it, and you want greater pancake, as they say, you have to come back that somehow or another it does matter to the Jews. So it does. Or they, so we have to find a very tifa in where they does, to be mafshit from kol in so it's pilot. We have to say even could say also Zakain Nogeya. Once again, we have to say that was the apish that he wanted the Kavioch to let himself into that. Not that he really is in that team, but he, as it were, allows himself, as it were, to be in it. So the Biur Bazeh is Sof Kosof, everything is Le'avasa Odom. And that's something we don't understand. Why he has leave these little Mishagoyim mentioned, but they drain themselves around, and he puts them to my Nefesh and he just loves them so much. And he does all this unbelievable. He lets himself in all these tremendously high dachastic shilas. What's he going to do? How's he get out of it? It's all about the epis will from their mansion. He wants to be with their mansion. That's what the Alter Rebbe is looking Perek Mem Tes. That's one of the most amazing prokim in the whole Tanya, even though all the prokim are most amazing. It's the Alter Rebbe writes over that everything, all in the order with the Evzimat is Rak La'avasa Oda. All La'avasa. Look over there. Dort steckt die ganze, das ist the bull. Dort steckt die ganze Linie. And he brings over there the Maimar Gemara in Masechta Bava Metzia. Sha'ava doichaches abosa. Wherever there's ava, everything quetches itself in such a way that if you really allow it to pee, it quetches or you find some eitzah. Auch upon him, says the Rebbe, that's the Indian, that it's not nagea back the other way. Okay, my chain who ba'er v'chayes ha-nefesh. Amachayes ha-guf, shuhu rach ha'ora levad, lahachiyes, guf hinas is pashtes. V'chol etzem bilti mispashet. I missed out on something? Kasha shemim v'chazim bavim, einay shum giroyen, u'kamoy kein hu ba'er v'chayes ha-nefesh, yeshuhu rach ha'ora levad, loi etzem ha-nefesh klau. The etzem ha-nefesh ain't a beger chayes le achiyoi. The hinei, it says, chayes lahachiyos, hu beginners is pashtas, the whole etzem bilti mispashet. Mamele ain't a beginners chayes lahachiyos. Mashe nimshe lahachiyos, hu haora levav. In other words, the Rebbe, that the etzem ha-nefesh itself is being as it is a etzem, then it's not chayis lahachiyos. In other words, that the etzem hanefesh is not chayis. The etzem hanefesh gives off chayis. Yeah, the etzem hanefesh itself is not chayis. It gives off chayis lahachiyos. A chayis lahachiyos, like we saw in the mashal of the oyer hamei ear. In other words, that it's already which brings with it a tchuna and a koyach of laha'ir. So the chayis that goes off from the etzem hanefesh brings with it that inyan of lahachiyos, which is bedimion to the inyan from laha'ir, and pink to say the moya is a inyan by the moya shemesh, for example, is a bahiri be'etem. So the inyan of the nefesh, the etzem hanefesh, is what we call chay be'etem. It's not chay lahachiyos, no, it's be'etem chay. Now we're going to see that you can't really say that mamish of the etzem hanefesh either. Although we'll put in relatively speaking for the moment, that's what we're saying. And that was anything which is a etzem is itself not b'derech ispashtas. Now, what do we mean by that? The etzem is mispashe. Not that the etzem itself is mispashe. No, the etzem gives off a ispashtas. It goes off a ispashtas from the etzem. But kol etzem itself is built in mispashe. Therefore, the etzem itself is not enough even for chayas lahachiyos. But you like in the Indian of the shemesh, yeah, the shemesh is a bahiri, but etzem not in your is lahoyi or anything in particular that goes off from your aura. That is lahoyi to the makablim. In the same way, the nefesh is mitat etzem minyonai. We're going to see a'inim from chay, but not chayus. The a'inim from nefesh is a'inim from chay mitat etzem definition, but that etzem is built in mishpashi. That's not what is actually chayis lehachiyos. What is chayis lehachiyos is only a ha'ora bilvad. It's only a bederach dimion of the oyer. It's a ha'ora, not a mahus. It's a ha'ora bilvad. Im yesh ha'ora hi lefi oiven ha'etzem, sha'etzem hu chay. Omamer ha'ora hu chay, pink to say in the marshal, yeah, that the etzem is chay. Over it's chay mitzad be'atzme, it's chay be'etzem, not chayis lahachiyos. Yeah, he begins chayis lahachiyos. And then compares it to the Vaziva, he go back to the Nimsha, to the Moshel, and he compares it once again to the Moshel. In other words, we've got a inin that the nefesh is a thing that we're going to use an expression chay be'etzem. We're going to have to define that. Mention in the coming shur. What do we mean by chay be'etzem? What we mean is, like the Shem is something that is a chay, but not lahachiyos mashu. In other words, it's not chay from something, but it's chay in its very itself. In other words, it's what you might call a tzilus of a chay. There was a ma'atzil dava shehu yachol atet chayes, aber hu atzmei lo mekabel chayes mishum dover. It's a etzem. It's a atzmei. From that it goes up. It being as it is a atzmi, it's not nimshach. What is nimshach is a ha'ora bilvad. That we'll see, and that's the dimion to the shemer. That's what we mean chay be'etzem. But there's a ina which is you can't say it's the hepech of chay. Or on the other hand, it's not chay lahachin. It's not chay to give off chay. It's chay be'etzem.
When you call us your question, why you say about the order it's more, and when it's a shepherd it's a mahus, and you answered in that the reason why is because the or goes into a keli, and then that relationship makes like a mahus, so to speak.